You've said that you didn't buy the Bitcoin to sell it, but would MicroStrategy ever take some off the table when you sense the market is at a top and then just buy in later when there's another correction? Or do you just plan to hodl through all the 80% downturns?
Yeah, again, I just disagree with your characterization. I don't expect an 80% downturn. I don't think it's a speculative asset. I don't think you can quote unquote take money off the table. The point is, if you have the superior asset, it's going up forever, Laura. Forever, Laura.
All right, welcome to Orange Pill Docs, the Bitcoin Fellowship, episode 1. I am hyped after that intro. We added the Little Bubble remix right this morning. That was a game time decision, and I am pumped about it. I'm Chris, aka Doc Stacks on X.
I'm Adam.
Pass over to Adam.
It's nice to see you guys. We've been trying to do this for a long time. Been talking about it for a year or two now. Kind of spawned out of the, True North Bros, getting to meet them at the Bitcoin conference, and we're just excited to talk to the medical community and get this going and start the Bitcoin Fellowship.
I'm pumped. We're going to jump right into it. We got a great intro, kind of who we are, what we're about, what this podcast is going to be. Adam, take it away.
Yeah. So the Bitcoin Fellowship, we're two anesthesiologists from Texas, and we just wanted to just kick this off with episode 1 and kind of go right from the start with the analogy of the cost of staying asleep. What is that opportunity cost of not paying attention to Bitcoin, not taking on and learning a Bitcoin Fellowship? And so this whole idea is that, we want to talk about Bitcoin, medicine, and the cost of staying asleep. And most people in medicine are pretty familiar with what a fellowship year is. That's an extra year of training where you kind of focus and fine tune your clinical skills on one specific specialty. And we just know a ton of people in the medical community that are not good at business, not good at personal finance, don't have the time, sometimes don't have the effort to learn about that kind of stuff. And as we've gone through, we just want to share some of our personal experience in taking our own Bitcoin Fellowship. And this whole notion of lifelong learning as docs, you always have to be up to date on the newest medical information, new drugs coming out, all that. We wanted that to be incorporated into kind of a personal finance podcast that surrounded Bitcoin and focused on medicine.
I think the biggest and most important text on this slide, and I have to say it, and we'll get better at make sure we include this. This is for educational and entertainment purposes only. What you're about to hear may be amazing, but it is not financial advice. The opinions expressed are solely our own and do not represent those of our employer or affiliated organizations, and you should always consult a qualified professional for personal recommendations. That's the official disclaimer. My disclaimer is doctors are really bad with money, as on the whole, on the average. We are both doctors, so we're like doctors' financial advice squared. You should probably turn the podcast off now and not listen.
Yeah, these views are solely our own. This is not a reflection of anything else. It's just our own experience and the conviction we have going forward. But on a side note, it's a personal goal of Chris and mine that at some point we'll get to pan this over to Tim Kotzman and have him do the not financial advice slide.
That will be a win for this pod, and I'll probably just retire. That'll be the peak of the pod.
Wrap it up.
Yeah. All right. This is more the intro. We kind of talked about this initially, but to put it on paper, I'm Chris Adcock, aka Doc Stacks. Again, anesthesiologist from Texas. My orange pill origin story is I learned about it in college in like a sociology of the internet class. Bought some in like 2012 probably. Sub 1,000, round tripped it. It had a downturn, round tripped it and sold it. So I was a Bitcoin trader. A pretty common origin story for people. Saw the light an overnight OB call as a resident in 2020. Had started a side business trying to sell stuff on Amazon. Had a personal loan, and the cash was just melting because the business model didn't really pan out. Flipped all that cash into Bitcoin and have been here ever since. I'm excited to build on this story. Adam, over to you.
Yeah, I'm Adam Gannon. I'm also an anesthesiologist in Texas. Chris and I trained together, and that's how we got to be good friends. And kind of, we got orange pilled by the same buddy co-resident of ours back around CA1, CA2 year, which is second or third year of anesthesia residency. And Chris had already kind of experienced it. That was my first exposure to Bitcoin. And as I bought it, I just started to study it, it became more and more orange pilled as I learned about it. And I actually have not sold a sat. I fully adopted a Bitcoin standard around the end of CA1 year and have just been going on ever since. And then bottom of the slide, it's kind of the mantra of anesthesia where people think we get paid to put you to sleep for surgery. The real thing we get paid for is not just to put you to sleep, but to wake you up. That's the important part, right? Anybody can just put you to sleep. And the more important part is that you wake up and you're still yourself at the end of it. And that's the whole goal of this podcast. It's to wake you up, right? To wake you up to what Bitcoin is, to what the orange pill is, and, hopefully make you more financially free.
Yeah, I think if the anesthesia gets a plane analogy a lot. Like anybody can push the throttle and pull up on the stick and get you in the air. Landing the plane and waking someone up, I think, is much more of the art.
A little bit of a different story there.
It's a much different story.
So why are we doing this, right? The whole point of the episode 1 is the opportunity cost. And as docs, I think we can all say we put in a lot of opportunity costs. There's time, right? 4 years of undergrad, 4 years of medical school, at least 4 years of residency, sometimes more depending on specialty, fellowship year. So there's at least 12 plus years that go into that opportunity cost to become a physician. And then you take into the capital that you have to put in. Those are the dollars, the debt, all of that you take on in order to become an attending. And then the labor, right? You become an attending after residency. You're just trying to work. Oftentimes you don't have time to go study personal finance. Where do I put my money? I'm just trying to pay off this debt. So there's just an overwhelming amount of opportunity costs associated with becoming a doctor. And we want those in medicine to find out sooner than we did, right? Luckily, we got orange pilled in residency, and I think that made a big difference. But the sooner you adopt a Bitcoin standard, the sooner you take that orange pill, the faster you adopt a Bitcoin standard and the more financially free that you'll be. That's what Chris and I have both found out, and that's what we want the medical community to find out.
And I think it's not about, I don't want this to be like, oh, get rich off of Bitcoin and never do your job again. Like, I think it just makes your job that much more fulfilling. I think we've both had that experience. Like, as we've established this foundation on sound money, like going to work is just like so much more enjoyable because I'm not worried about, I know the paycheck's coming, but I know that I'm saving my value in the hardest asset known to humanity.
Yeah, it's what money should be, right?
Right.
Your ability to save. We put all that effort up front. The goal should be at the tail end to just be able to focus on our patients. And there's enough stress there in the everyday life of being a physician and all the other crap that we know we have to deal with. We're not trying, this whole podcast is not saying, there's a better opportunity cost to not being a physician. We think that's a worthwhile endeavor, and we get tremendous 100%. Personal satisfaction out of being physicians. It's this whole notion of like, you don't have to, you're taken care of, right? You don't have to worry about the tail end. Your family's taken care of. You can just focus on doing what you like to do, and that's taking care of patients.
But I mean, we already both get comments at work like Bitcoin's up like 2% or something. It's like, what are you even doing here? Aren't you retired yet? It's like, I mean, yeah, I want to end up working less and spend time with my family because my life and my time is more valuable than anything. But the goal, at least, especially right now, is not like to stop working. It's just to make your time at work the most valuable you can and protect that economic energy and that physical, mental energy you're spending in exchange for money. I mean, that's why we all go to work.
Opportunity cost, right?
Yeah.
The time you spent with your family, your loved ones, your friends, doing the hobbies you like to do compared to being at a call shift at the hospital.
Yep. You're making, even if you don't realize it, you're making that decision every time you get in the car to go to work.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. Now, why are we really doing this? Because I'm married. Adam is soon to be married, and our wives and fiance cannot stand to hear us talk about Bitcoin one more second in social settings. So we have to take it to the internet with internet friends.
It's bad when you get home, and we start talking about our day, and your fiance or your wife starts talking about the problems they have with work or family issues, friend issues, whatever. And somehow Chris and my response always winds up tail ending to
Bitcoin.
Bitcoin fixes this. And inevitably you get the eyes rolling in the back of your head, or as you'll see here, the Saylor sigh.
You get the Saylor sigh.
Why don't you break this down simply for people like me that don't fully understand it?
Okay.
If you went out the yield curve on bonds, or if you went in.
Sure.
Is constantly growing. It's happening as all of these new companies, new.
So let's just start at the beginning, if you don't mind explaining what is it?
Sure.
I think the Saylor side works two ways, because I sigh when I'm asked to stop talking about Bitcoin, and my wife sighs like that when she hears me start talking about Bitcoin.
It's two ends of the spectrum.
Yeah.
Like the 1% and the 99%.
But that's why we're here. If you have similar home life experience, no one at work or your home wants to hear you talk about finances or anything, welcome. If you get to that point, you'll reflect on this.
It's a safe space, guys.
Yeah, it's a safe space. Happy to provide it. All right, take this one away, Adam.
Yeah. So again, talking about opportunity costs, the average starting person coming out of medical school and starting their residency intern year has $250,000 in medical school debt, and then an average of about $50,000 in undergrad debt. This is just averages, right? When you go start your intern year, you make about 60 grand or so a year, getting paid, minimum wage essentially to work 70, 80 hours a week, sometimes more. And you get that increases 2 to 3K annually for a minimum of a 3 to 7 year residency, depending on your specialty. So that you're going to come out at the end of your residency several $100,000 in debt based upon that math. Well, if you take the average Bitcoin compound annual growth rate just over the last 4 years, that's about 30%. And so if you were to just go ahead and say, compare two people, the guy that goes through, like Chris and I went through medical school and straight into residency, we're going to go through and we're going to have an average about $300,000 in debt at the end of that 4-year residency. If you take another guy that started to invest anywhere from 200, 300,000 in something like Bitcoin, and then you sandbag those investments to 20% compound annual growth rate over 4 years, that's over $600,000. And we're not saying that, somebody's going to go YOLO all into Bitcoin. This is just an example to do the numbers. But if you calculate those two individuals have $1 million spread starting out at the beginning of the career for that physician, right? They're going to be 300 grand in debt, and this person will have 600,000 in investments, right? And that 300 grand in debt is working against you. That has interest payments and everything else, while the 600 grand in capital is actually working for that other individual. So all that being said, the cost of becoming a physician and going through training, that's all inflating and increasing, right? It's not just you're 300 grand in debt. Like, there's a huge opportunity cost that goes into that. This doesn't even take into account the fellowship year that some people take, and some fellowship years are 3 years as a specialty.
Yep.
So
you have it at the bottom of the slide, but the med school tuition is not decreasing; it's going up. But residency pay, like your first chance at recouping some of that money as a resident, is mandated by the government. So the amount of stickiness in those wages is incredible. I don't know the last time that residency pay significantly went up, but it is like the last thing to change. The university and the med school can change the tuition tomorrow, but it could take 10 years to have that change reflected in your eventual residency pay.
Yeah, that's not increasing anytime soon.
No.
And resident docs aren't unionized or anything like that, like nurses. That's just, it's a sunk cost at this point.
And we kind of this kind of gets into that, but like once you're in practice, this MEI is like a CPI analog for physicians, like how much it costs to run a practice, like all the inputs. That gray line, as you can see, is going up and to the right. Like, it's getting more and more expensive to run a practice. And this is the scale from 2001 to 2024. And then pay, the red line, has stayed relatively flat. So from 2001 to 2024, the physician payment, like once you're done with all this, like, so your opportunity to recoup all that and repay all that debt that you accumulated, your physician pay has declined 29% in real terms compared to practice costs. So not good. We're not winning. If you zoom out and look at physician pay in terms of overall inflation, like not just the physician practice specific, inflation's up 86% cumulatively since 2001, and inflation adjusted pay for physicians is down 33%. So I think physicians get a bad rap. I'll pause here. Physicians get a bad rap for, like, taking all this money, and healthcare costs are going up, and people assume that it's just going in your doctor's pocket. That is 100% not true. I mean, this is not financial advice, and I'm not going to give you data to support that, but qualitatively, that is not true. Like, physicians are not reaping the increased medical costs that you see when you go to the doctor. It's going to admin and the bureaucracy of medicine, and I'm sure we'll have future episodes about that. But physicians show up to work every year and make less and less and less, and on the flip side, they're asked to do more and more and more. We're expected to leverage all the technological advances of electronic EHRs and now AI in the face of getting paid less and less every year.
Yeah, two things I'd like to add to that. Medical school's been 4 years for the last 250 years. We've had some advancements in medicine in the last 250 years, but medical school is still 4 years, right? And we're expected to just absorb all that information and continue to learn after.
Yeah.
And then the other big thing I want to add is Chris's dad's actually a family care doc who's been subsequently Orange Pill. We'll hope to have him on the podcast at some point. But an interesting conversation that I've had with him and learned from Chris is that his dad's real wage, his real earnings have not increased since 1996. They've actually been going down. So over the last 30 years or so, as a physician, his real wage has gone down.
I think we'll get him on the pod. His Orange Pill story will resonate a lot with, especially there's some docs tuning in that are a generation ahead of us. A lot of docs intuitively know, obviously the federal deficit's not good and our pay's not going up. I think he presents his story and why he was so ready to be orange pilled. It's gonna be a great pod. I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, that's the whole purpose of this, right, guys? Is that
we're recording this on 4th of July. It's 4th of July, 2025. I didn't open. It's block height 903,978. Bitcoin price it's 107. It's loading. What is the Bitcoin price? 107,802. I meant to open with that.
Can I pause so I can go buy this mini dip real quick?
I know. Pause. We'll bring you a commercial that we don't have a sponsor for yet. But anyway, I'm saying we're recording 4th of July. My dad's coming over. We may just actually clip some content with him and release it in a little bit. But
yeah,
just so pumped. I hope this is news for people. Opens your eyes. I know this is not a cumulative deep dive into what this problem is, but if this doesn't make sense to you, if this is all news, there's so much free information out there. We hope to provide the high yield versions of it as we go through this podcast. But get on YouTube, get on X, get on ChatGPT, any of the AIs, leverage that, learn some in your spare time. It doesn't take a lot of time, but it takes consistent effort to show up.
Conviction, right?
Conviction.
Freedom money on Freedom Day.
Yep. Love it. That should be the title of the podcast. If we were doing this live, that would be the title. We're going to edit and release it a little bit. We're still learning the podcast, but.
So kind of what Chris was talking about. Everybody kind of inherently feels that problem, right? Why am I working so hard and there's less money in the bank? Why am I having to work more, run faster on the hamster wheel in order to stay afloat and stay at the same, rate we're going at? So why is the dollar purchasing power declining? Why is there all this inflation that everybody's talking about? Well, I hate to break it to you, but the dollar is monopoly money. There's nothing backing the US dollar other than the full, faith of the US government. So it used to be that we had a gold standard up until about 1971. Nixon took us off the gold standard and there has been nothing since. This is the problem that we're inherently feeling is that the money supply is growing at about 7% annually. And that's compounding over time. If you actually take a look at this money supply, you see that the curve is steepening.
Yep.
As it's gone along,
getting
to the
higher
right.
It's getting higher in all the wrong ways.
Yeah, we're moving in the wrong direction, right? And so that's what you feel. It's eating away. Not, it's that hidden tax. There's not just a tax on your income. There's a tax on your savings, and this is the tax on that savings. Now we have the deficit growing at greater than 37 trillion. We have the big beautiful bill that just got spent. That's supposed to add about 5 trillion to the deficit. There's going to be another big print. Shout out to Larry Lepard, but you need something to protect yourself. This is what we all feel. This is why we can't keep up.
Yep. Go back to that slide real quick. Whoops. We're fighting with the presentation. But this is why we Bitcoin. Because once you realize that, so if you get one, I try to explain this to family and my wife, especially a lot. Why does it matter that they're inflating the money? If you work for imagine a pizza. If you work for one slice of the pizza and that represents there's 10 slices and you are going to trade that one slice of pizza for whatever to live on, you'll cut some off to buy your electricity and your water or whatever. So you have 1/10 of that's your purchasing power is 1/10 of the whole pie. If the government all of a sudden just makes new pizza out of thin air, your one slice is worth less to the whole market. I mean, that's my current like extremely simplified version, but that's what this chart is.
Yeah.
The pizza is getting bigger, and your wages are not increasing at the same rate. So your purchasing power and your economic energy is losing over time.
It's being diluted.
Yeah, you're being
Right.
diluted out of, and they're stealing your time and your energy, and that's
Yeah.
why I think a very big subset of people that get orange pilled get kind of like fired up about it. There's like the stages of grief of being orange pilled. There's definitely like an anger stage when
100%. When you kind of learn what they're doing to you.
yeah,
Yeah. And like Chris said, the nice thing about Bitcoin is that pizza never gets any bigger.
right.
That pizza
That's
is always
the whole
same
premise.
size. That's what's preserving digital energy. You know, the translation of your capital and your time to digital energy that's preserved.
And we're not going to get into the Bitcoin 101. Like we might have some more content on that later. Like we're not going to walk you through. If you have zero knowledge of Bitcoin, there's plenty of resources out there. Message us, email us. We'll be happy to get them to you. And we'll do some basic content later on. But that is the whole premise of Bitcoin, is that there's 21 million coins and there will never be any more. Period. Full stop.
Yeah.
They can't. This chart doesn't exist. It approaches a limit of 21 million.
Yeah. The thing I always mention when I'm standing in the back of the OR and I'm trying to orange pill people, or that conversation comes up, I always say, 80% of the money has been created since 2020 and COVID.
Yeah.
Since 1776 is a perfect day to talk about it, with it being July 4th. But over those 250 years, all of that money, 80% of it has come in the last 4 years.
Right.
That's not a good trajectory to be on. That's not the thing I want to be saving and holding.
That's not winning. That's not big or beautiful.
We are not having
This
fun.
is not a big and beautiful chart. This is not a political podcast, but this is not a big and beautiful chart.
You know what is a big and beautiful chart?
This next one. Bitcoin price since inception in 2010. So the Bitcoin price in fiat terms and dollar terms is going up and to the right, and that will continue to be so. And we'll talk about the mechanics of that as we go on into this journey of the pod. That's all I got for this slide. I'm like the bull energy right now, and like how fired up I am to be recording this podcast is through the roof.
I just love that when Doc Stacks here edited this, he made the line go from green to orange, which is, I think, the natural transition as you learn more about Bitcoin.
Yep. All right, what do we have next? This is more just opportunity cost examples. If you took $10,000 and invested it in 2019, which is 6 years ago, the different lines represent like your returns over time. Green is a savings account. If you just parked it in your savings, no one would ever tell you that's a risky move. You kept it in your savings and you moved some to checking and paid your bills. That line is completely flat. Like you made nothing. You made 0.2% per year. If you took a traditional investment approach and you won the S&P 500, which has a recent return of 8% per year, that's that blue line. You're a little bit better off. A lot of people would think that that's winning. You're definitely not losing. If you took the Magnificent Seven, which is the top 7 companies in the S&P 500, that returns about 30% a year. So if you had a little bit of conviction and you said, I don't want the whole index, I just want the winners, you're that purple line, and your portfolio value goes up to, it's not an interactive chart, I just screenshotted it, but 50,000 by now from 2019 to now. And then orange is the Bitcoin at $10,000 put in at 2019. You took a huge write up in 2021. There was a bear market into 2022, and then we've been up and to the right ever since. But the swing, the volatility, that roller coaster nature of Bitcoin is what scares a lot of people. Oh, it's too volatile. I'm gonna go lose everything. We're hoping to get rid of some of those myths as we go through the content in this podcast. But as you can see, if you held with conviction and had a long time horizon, you are multiples and multiples ahead of your colleagues.
Yeah. Speaking about time horizon, historically, anybody that's held Bitcoin greater than 4 years is 100% in profit. So this shows that it's, if you've got money that you're not planning to use, or you just want to save its value over 4 years,
100% of those people are in profit. They're not up 100%.
Yeah. Yeah. That's sorry. Make that clear.
So 100% if you hold for 4 years,
you're up.
Historically, there's been a 0% chance that you've lost money. Some 4 years as it rolls have been more profitable than others, but if you hold it for that, if you extend your time horizon, like invest for the long term and have conviction about it, you're going to make a positive return.
I think the other big thing to mention about this this slide is we talked about how the real inflation rate's around 7% with the growth of the money supply, right?
Yeah.
And most people in their retirement, most docs who aren't paying attention and just going to work every day and just getting their match, putting it in the S&P index, you're up 8%, right? So you're basically like treading water. That real growth in that money that you're putting in retirement is about 1% per year, which, inflation's getting worse. So unless those S&P stocks start doing better. And the funny thing is that like of the S&P index, 450 of those stocks in the S&P 500 are not generating a real return, right? That's why so many of the younger generation is hedging out further on the risk curve and putting it into the Magnificent Seven to try and chase those returns because they feel that what we're talking about. That
Yeah, I think everyone feels what we've talked about. No one. Hopefully, this podcast and like what we are going to talk about puts it into like a framework in words. But like people inherently feel this. Like that's why all the younger generation degen gambles on meme coins and fart coin and
right.
all
They're
of them.
still renting. They're not.
Yeah.
They're getting married later. They're having kids later. They're not moving out of their parents' house. Right. It's just unfortunately, our younger generation feels that. And
The
so
GME craze a few years ago was a great example of that.
Yeah. And Chris and I are both millennials, and we're lucky enough to be in a situation where we're okay financially with our being physicians. But like I work with some of the, nurses our age and, some of my buddies that are in less higher income fields. And I don't know how they're going to get out. And I think the answer is Bitcoin. If they're not in, I can't see how they're going to retire. How are they going to save up for a house? The odds are just so stacked against them.
Yeah. Again, once you exit the matrix, unplug from the matrix, another, analogy for orange pilling, like it's really hard to go back. Almost impossible. I don't think I've met a Bitcoiner that took the orange pill, did the work. Like nobody goes back. So if this is new to you, investigate at your own risk because it might take over a lot of your hobbies. But I think it's in terms of fellowship and like lifetime learning, like it's the most high yield thing you can do for you and your family, future family. That was kind of a sidebar. I think I derailed our thought process. But let's go to the next slide. Oh, this one is actually we added last minute. Bitcoin Prague just happened, a big European Bitcoin conference. This slide was put up by James Lavish, who is a hedge fund investor. I think he's actually based out of Dallas. Did he play for the Dallas Stars, or am I making that up?
I am not sure. I think he is from the Dallas area.
I'm pretty sure
there's some pretty smart guys from the Dallas area.
Talk about this chart. I'm gonna look up if he played for the Stars.
So I think the big thing about this is, as Chris alluded to with James, is that Bitcoin enhances your performance. So this is just a regular 60-40 portfolio. And if you add Bitcoin to those portfolios at 1%, 5%, or 10%, you can see how your returns get amplified. And the funny thing, you should definitely go listen to the James Lavish Prague video where it's about 40 minutes long, but it's just full of pearls. He talks about how the risk-adjusted return of Bitcoin being incorporated into portfolios actually goes down. So you're actually amplifying your returns and you have lower risk, right? At 1% Bitcoin, you have 153% return increase. 5% Bitcoin is 275%. And then at 10%, it's actually close to 500% returns over 4 years.
He played at Yale and he did play for the Stars. Someone told me that and I never verified it. We're verifying it live. We need a producer. Like, whose producer is Logan? Is that Joe Rogan?
There's a Saylor side there. Yeah, I know. That's it's what happens when you put two.
Logan, look it up. Look it up, Logan.
That's right.
I may be making that name up. My neighbor Logan just texted me. Shout out to Logan.
This is the Bitcoin slide, right? I was going to say the gold slide, but we're on a Bitcoin standard. So opportunity cost is king. And we just wanted to incorporate this slide because this is more of our own personal journey. So on this, we have the Bitcoin price over the last 5 years. We have our different stages of training. And when Chris and I really decided to take our own Bitcoin fellowship. So I kind of around CA2 year, that's when I said I started getting into Bitcoin. It was around 32,000 or so. And I started putting in what little I had and could save as a resident, which, wasn't much. And that went up to about 55,000. And of course, that's how it always happens, is then it surges back down and I had to watch it drop down closer to 20,000 around CA3 year. And around our CA3 year, our fourth year and final year of residency, Chris and I are talking about doing a fellowship. That's pretty usual in residencies, kind of when you decide. And both of us were just thinking, we like certain specialties in anesthesia, but at the same time, that's a whole year of attending salary that we're going to forego. And it's kind of funny because we were talking about it for the first couple months or so, and Bitcoin had already went up from 20,000 to 30,000 by the time we're graduating. And by that time, Chris and I had already committed to just going straight out and foregoing a fellowship. And in that time, it's just amazing what the opportunity cost was. You can look at the orange on the slide and see that at day one attending, the Bitcoin price was around 30,000. And if we would have finished our fellowship, the Bitcoin price was at 55,000. And
it was chopping around 60,000. So it's like it doubled in that.
It doubled
that
in
year
just
would have cost us half of our
that year. And we're talking about how Bitcoin's sitting at 107,000 today. I mean, there's always a chance it dips back down, but I'd be surprised to see a Bitcoin below 60,000 again at this point. I don't know about you, Chris, but that's the opportunity cost, right? We're not saying don't go do a fellowship if that's something you really want to do, but you just have to understand there's a lot of cost there. It's not just year, it's that compounded year of growth.
I think if you understand all of this, what the true cost of doing a fellowship is, and then you still choose it, like that makes it even much more noble pursuit. So
Absolutely.
for all the residents seeing this and still want to do fellowship, like hats off to you, kudos to you. I love your conviction to that. Slice off 1% of that conviction to your field and like learn about your own personal finance.
So one of my backgrounds and my majors in college was economics in addition to biology. And the funny thing is that I tend to look at things kind of naturally in opportunity costs. And so Chris and I, when we were residents, we did a ton of moonlighting shifts, especially after being orange pilled so that we could stack more. And I remember doing the math, and a moonlighting shift would pay us about $1,000 for 8 to 10 hour shift that you're doing on top of an 80-hour work week already on a random Saturday or Sunday that you would have had off. And I used to denominate that in Bitcoin. And the funny thing is, now I take these extra shifts as an attending 4 years later, and the Bitcoin price that I was doing those moonlighting shifts at was about 20,000. The Bitcoin price today is almost 110,000.
Yeah.
So I do these shifts and I think about it in Bitcoin terms. And as an attending anesthesiologist, I'm making less Bitcoin on a 12-hour attending paid shift than I was as a resident doing a moonlighting shift. And you think about that and just kind of warps your brain a little bit, right? And why is that? It's because your money's working for you, right? Bitcoin's working for you 24/7, 365. TikTok next block.
Yep.
And I think that's important. Is paying attention to that opportunity cost and denominating things, those call shifts in Bitcoin.
I'm going to butcher it, but butcher this quote, and I don't even know who said it. But at some point, like your incremental value of trying to earn and work to get a 20% raise is so much more than just putting it in an asset that will grow at 20% a year. Like it's a one-time decision. You know, think about how hard it would be to go justify a 20% raise to your boss at whatever job you do. It's like impossible, almost impossible. We barely get to keep up with inflation. So if you want to go above that, I mean, good luck to you. I hope you have a boss that will do that.
That's not going to happen. That's not going to happen in medicine, right? The nice thing about medicine is you kind of know when that next big pay rise is happening, right? When you're going from residency to attending, maybe you're getting like a salary bump in your attending years if you move up from like an associate to a partner in one of your groups or something like that.
Invest out of your buy-in to if your group has real estate or a clinic or something like that.
Yeah,
like
but you're not going to get it for the most part. Most of us aren't going to get a 5 to 10% pay rise from year to year like you're in the business sector, right? So hopefully the way you do that is through your investments.
So this quote I'm more sure on, but it was Dan Hillary of MSTR True North tweeted in a reply, and for some reason it showed up on my feed and I like bookmarked it, basically printed it out. But it's weird to think, and I was programmed that my success in life was going to be all based on how hard I worked, which is very true. Like my hard work, all the education, I played football in college, like that enabled me to get my education. That has enabled me to have a solid foundation of earning money. But my long-term success for me and my family is actually more on the education and like the learning I do and the decisions I make based on that. Which is it's weird. I guess that's part of is that what becoming an adult is? I don't know. But like the decisions you make and like where you choose to point your energy is more important, is more valuable to you than the actual energy you're producing.
Yeah.
Does that make sense? Did I totally butcher that?
I think Dan basically says like he's getting to the point now where the value of the decisions he makes and where he decides to move capital around is more important than the hard work that he puts in.
Yeah. which is a weird. It sounds counterintuitive.
It's
and
wild to think about, but
Yeah.
you know, hopefully as physicians, we all get to that point, right?
Yeah.
If you think about like the incomes that we have, if you just live like a resident, shout out to the White Coat Investor, which I think every medical student and resident should read. It teaches you these principles that when you first become an attending, if you're able to build up that initial nest egg and save up and you park it in the right assets,
Yeah, put it to work for you.
that will do the work for you.
Yeah.
And it lets you start scaling back and focus on the things that really matter. Again, Chris and I are both saying being physicians and taking care of patients and our work matters, but you don't want to have to work to live.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it. All right. I keep derailing everything. We thought we weren't going to do Bitcoin 101. We're going to have Saylor explain. This is actually geared toward corporate adoption. Like he tried to get Microsoft to buy Bitcoin. Just watch this 2-minute clip and we'll kind of digest it at the end.
Bitcoin represents the greatest digital transformation of the 21st century. It represents digital capital. The global wealth is distributed across assets that provide utility and others that preserve capital. But risk is destroying trillions of dollars of that capital every single year, and investors are turning to digital capital in the form of Bitcoin in order to avoid that risk. Digital capital is economically and technically superior to physical capital, and it represents a revolutionary advance in capital preservation. The asset class itself is growing from trillions to hundreds of trillions of dollars, and it is backed by digital power along with political and economic power. Bitcoin's the best asset you can own. The numbers speak for themselves. It makes a lot more sense to buy Bitcoin than to buy your own stock back or to hold Bitcoin rather than holding bonds. If you're going to outperform, you're going to need Bitcoin. Luckily, you have an alternative. Public support for Bitcoin is surging, as is support for the U.S. Bitcoin Strategic Reserve.
Sell them into Bitcoin. That way, we wouldn't have to use any new dollars.
As is Wall Street support.
I believe Bitcoin is legitimate.
And the President of the United States says,
never sell your Bitcoin, right?
That's why we're entering year one of the crypto renaissance. And you have a choice to make. Cling to the past or embrace the future. Divest billions of dollars and slow your growth rate. Invest billions of dollars and accelerate your growth rate.
So pretty calming, right? That's one of our favorite Saylor videos. And if you guys don't know who Saylor is, you'll probably see a lot more of that on the podcast. I'm representing the OG MicroStrategy merch, of course, and Chris and I are very heavy strategy bulls, but that'll be a separate podcast. We love Bitcoin. We love strategy. We wanted exposure in our retirement to Bitcoin, and that's how we first found strategy. And shout out to Quant Pros One.
100% shout out to Quant Pros One.
Yeah, Chris and I, that's my quant. Chris and I like to joke that we're second generation kid analysts. We're hoping to work on the third generation here with you guys. But this slide, right? So just a little bit more Bitcoin background. We're moving from analog to digital. You heard Saylor talk about digital capital and the digital transformation of energy. And there's $600 trillion in assets that needs to move over to the digital space. The funny thing is that people think they're late to this boat of Bitcoin, right? It's already gone up from pennies to, a few dollars to now 100,000 a coin. And the current market cap of Bitcoin is $2.1 trillion. The current market cap of gold is $22.5 trillion. So there's 11x difference in market cap. And you probably hear a lot on the news, if you're familiar at all with Bitcoin, they refer to it as digital gold. But it's got a lot of properties that make it much superior to gold. Those being like that it's instantly transferable, the fact that it's divisible up to the 100 millionth of a coin, it's completely transparent on the blockchain, right? And we talked about TikTok next block. Just think about like Fort Knox. Do we really have that gold there? We've been asking to see that for months, but you can just go on the Bitcoin blockchain and see every 10 minutes the next block is hashed. So all that being said, if the Bitcoin price were to 10x and be on parity with gold, that would put Bitcoin about $1.1 million a coin.
Yep.
So this is just a slide that's showing why Bitcoin is the superior money. So you've got gold, Bitcoin, and the dollar, and all of those things I was talking about, right? Bitcoin being completely transparent and decentralized, it's divisible up to the 100 millionth of a coin, has a limited supply capped at 21 million. It's open source, right? Imagine trying to take $10 million worth of gold through an airport, right? And the cost associated with carrying that. Chris is bigger than me, but that'd be a lot of work carrying that through the airport, and I'm pretty sure I couldn't.
I think there was a headline recently, like I think it was an airline employee got caught like with gold bar inside their body cavity. I won't go into more detail than that, but like
that should be a reason alone that you Bitcoin.
Yeah, like I can just put a hardware wallet in my pocket or a seed phrase in my pocket and go wherever I want. You can put them in your head. I mean, I don't trust my own memory that well, but like the portability and the cost of maintaining your value is just so different. I love the last line here. It says shine, and like Bitcoin. I mean, Bitcoin has a no and dollar has a no. Gold, that's like gold's like one thing.
Yeah, you can have a little bit of gold just for the shine aspect, you know. Or worst case scenario, just get yourself a little printed off Bitcoin 3D printed that shines, put it on your desk. But yeah, I think one of the cool things is that what Chris said about the 12-word seed phrase, right? You hear these stories about people fighting wars. Like I know there's anecdotes of people in the Ukraine-Russia war that didn't want to be a part of it. And so they were relatively stuck there. But some of those people converted their wealth into Bitcoin, memorized their seed phrase. They didn't believe in that fight, left and went somewhere else and downloaded their wealth from knowing those seed phrases. I think that's the cool thing, is that Bitcoin allows you to attach your finances and your capital and your wealth to the person, right? It's true self-sovereignty and lets you be your own bank. You can't do that.
It's a bearer asset. You own it, and you can use it and spend it without permission from anybody.
Yeah, you can't do that with any other asset.
No. All right, take this one away, Adam, and I'll add my recommendations at the end.
Yeah, so it's pretty overwhelming, right? We were both there. We remember, where do I even start, right? What is this Bitcoin thing? Why do I need to pay attention to it? It's complex, but just like medicine, you know, think about the complexity of medicine and how specialized we've become. You start to build a foundation, you start to do the work, you start to study, and that conviction to invest and own the asset comes with the knowledge base. And so that's kind of this whole idea of the Bitcoin Fellowship, right? This whole year of these years of lifelong learning, when you come out, we wanted to build a community of smart individuals that are committed to doing the work, but it's just this safe space where we encourage people to kind of share their story, to learn more and help educate one another. And so, you know, starting from us, we both have recommendations of where, if we could talk to our former selves back in medical school or even pre-med, how would we start? And so my personal recommendation is that in order to understand what the answer is, Bitcoin, you kind of have to understand what the problem is, right? And like I said, we all kind of have that inherent sense of like, we can feel that something's eating away at our purchasing power and being able to store our wealth. Well, it's really the unlimited central bank money printing, right? And so how do you learn more about that? There's two books that I always recommend when I'm trying to orange pill the OR staff or the nurses or the surgeons and other docs that I'm working with. The first one is The Big Print from Lawrence Lepard. That came out in the last year. He basically designed it to
December, I think.
First half of the book is talking about the problem. It's the money printing. And the second half talks about Bitcoin, the answer. And it's very, very written in like layman's terms. He wanted to have the idea of like, you go pick that up at a bookstore in the airport and you're able to just read it and be like, this is what's going on. So I recommend that one. And then of course the Bitcoin Standard by Saifedean. And that's the one that gets more into Bitcoin. It's kind of the OG Bitcoin book.
Yeah, I think for my 2 sats on the Bitcoin Standard, if you don't have any economic or business background, that's going to be pretty quickly overwhelming. If you have some knowledge of it, it's like the OG orange pill Bitcoin book, but it can get overwhelming. So if it does, number one, that's normal. Number two, just back up, maybe try the big print if you haven't already, or just take your time and digest the Bitcoin Standard slowly.
Yeah, but that's also why we're here. We want you guys to read that kind of stuff. Reach out to us, you know, Twitter. We'll post this on YouTube. You know, you have both of our Twitter handles. We're happy to answer these questions. Yeah, this is what we're doing all the time anyway. When we get home, we just love talking about Bitcoin. We love, you know, it's helped us. We want it to help you guys.
I think as we were recording this, I kind of thought about, you know, why are we really doing this? I'm not great about just cold calling people that I work with, like, hey, what do you think about Bitcoin, and talking about it. But if you want to if you work with us and watch this and come talk to me, I will 100% sit down and talk about whatever you want. But if I don't know where you're coming from and what your questions are, it's hard to like start that cold. But if you have questions, I either can answer it pretty quickly for you, or I will point you in the right direction. And I think that's what me and Adam are both here for. And if you don't work with us and watch this online, obviously just message us, reach out. We're happy to help.
I think just to piggyback and kind of share a little personal anecdote about that, with Chris and I both went to the Bitcoin conference this past year together, and that was just such a cool experience. And like we talked about, we're both big True North fans, and we got to meet all those guys. But I remember there was a night at the conference when we just wanted to walk up and get a picture with punter Jeff, just because, you know, we watch him every Wednesday night and we've been following him for so long. It's just kind of a cool fanboy moment for both of us.
Yeah.
And Jeff pulled us aside and was like, hey, do you want to go grab a whiskey and just like talk about stuff? And so we got to spend like an hour and a half just talking to Jeff, just us two one-on-one. And he was just there to answer all these questions. And you could just tell how genuine that whole conversation was and how genuine of a person he was. And that's really the feel of what most of these Bitcoiners are, right? Yeah. They're just genuine people that want other people to understand and to thrive from Bitcoin. And medicine's already kind of naturally full of those people. That's part of the reason this came together for us, is that those people are kind of already that way.
Yeah.
They just want to take care of people and then go home to their families and not have to worry. That's why it makes sense just to mesh this together. But I'll let Chris take away his recommendations.
And my comment on this, and I'll give my recommendations, but the Bitcoin ecosystem is such a flipped on its head version of like the fiat traditional finance ecosystem. Like if I found out some edge in traditional finance, I'm incentivized to not share it with you or anyone else. Like I would not make this video, because the more people that know about my edge that I'm, siphoning off value from someone else, the less valuable it is to me. Bitcoin changes those incentives because there's a fixed supply. There's only 21 million. That the more we increase the network, like the more valuable it becomes to everyone. So
cooperation, not competition.
Yeah. Like you have these little unlocks as you go through the orange pill thing, but that's a huge one. So my recommendations, I did it as C1, do one, teach one. If you're in medicine, you know kind of what that means. C1, leave this podcast and go to YouTube and look up What's the Problem by Joe Bryan. I think it's Satsmo Joe is maybe his YouTube name, but if you look up What's the Problem, Joe Bryan, it'll come up. It's a great, it doesn't even mention Bitcoin till the end, but it was his 30-minute video of I think he went on a retreat with his wife or his friends, and they all had to bring a presentation, which I think is a cool concept. So he's like, okay, I want to talk about Bitcoin, but I have no idea who these people are. It was like everyone kind of invites someone and we all do a little mini conference, which I think is cool. But he's like, I don't know where they're coming from, what their exposure is. So it's like the very base level first principles approach to what sound money is and what broken money is, and he fast forwards you through the timeline and where these two societies end up. Hugely valuable. If this is all new to you, watch it. Do one. If you're a little bit more advanced, you want to get involved. We're not going to make official recommendations ever of how much to buy, what to buy, where to buy. But investigate things like River if you're interested. I think they're a great resource to purchase your Bitcoin. We're not sponsored by them. There's no kickback. There's no referral code. But they have proof of reserves. They keep your money in a public way and have the Bitcoin that you hold there in a public way. And additionally, they have a really great customer service. And then finally, teach one. So C1, do one, teach one. What your action step is, another action step. Find a Bitcoin co-fellow. Find someone you work with. If you've had a conversation maybe about finances or whatever, find someone to study this with you, a study buddy, a co-fellow. Once you unplug from the matrix, and kind of realize we're all just kind of in autopilot and watching TikTok and collecting paychecks and living paycheck to paycheck. When you unplug from that and realize there's more out there and you should probably be doing more, it can get really, really isolating. And you go through these cycles where you feel, am I crazy or is everyone else crazy? I think it's been really cool starting in my career with Adam and having very similar views on a lot of things, including money. And we're always texting each other, hey, did you see this video? What do you think? I disagree. Do you agree? Whatever. But it makes you, when you have someone that can, reflect those ideas off of, you feel a lot less isolated. Like, our goal is not to make you feel isolated. The goal of this podcast is to be a safe space and a community for you to discuss those ideas and issues and questions. But try to find someone in your real life. Like, if it's your dad or your mom or your coworker or whoever, going from 0 to 1 Bitcoin friend, like, is one of the biggest things you can do.
Yeah, and that's part of the reason we like the idea of starting this Orange Pill Docs community, right? Is that, like, it can be really isolating. And I can't tell you how many times I try to have those Orange Pill conversations in the OR with the surgeon, and they just don't get it, right? Or they think I'm crazy. Yeah. And, I think I'm a little bit more optimistic than Chris in those regards, and I try to orange pill a lot of people. And I've been somewhat successful, but it's so nice to just go back, and when you have that person just thinks you're crazy, and I talk to Chris, and it's, not gonna make it, man. I'll work on them another day. But
you go through cycles where you're like, everyone's just not gonna make it, and I'm just gonna keep my head down and like stack sats, or like, I need to help everyone that I possibly know.
Yeah.
And I'm probably somewhere in the middle. Adam's a little more optimistic.
So what's coming next, guys? I mean, there's just so much different avenues that we can go through. And I think that's a big component is why we want to reach out to you guys. Like, hit us up. Let us know what you want to see. We like the idea of doing some of these where it's a little bit more quantitative and there's some data, some, weekly headline rundown of what's going on with Bitcoin, the newest stuff that's coming out, the new news. There's all these Bitcoin treasury companies that are coming out. We'd love to do a separate strategy one because that's, a big investment that Chris and I are into. We could do a separate pure Bitcoin one. We also really want to focus on these pulling back the drapes interviews where we get other docs who stack sats to come on and kind of tell their stories. We think it'd be neat for them to kind of share their orange pill moments, talk about their everyday life. We can even do some components where they talk about medicine if there's anybody interested in learning about like anesthesia or specific components of surgery. There's just a lot to talk about, right?
Yeah, I would love to hear, like, if we get some surgeons that we know that are, orange pilled, like what their journey is through their education. Because we obviously know what anesthesia is like, and a lot of our Bitcoin friends are anesthesiologists, so we kind of have shared experience. But like, I don't know what it's like to do a surgery residency and all that. Yeah, so I'm looking forward to that aspect of it personally.
That was another neat thing at the Bitcoin conference is we had a little bit of a meetup with some of the docs and got to meet some of the other docs who are into Bitcoin and just kind of hearing their story and what built their conviction and why they're still stacking. It's just neat to hear that from all different angles, and a lot of that kind of converges and comes together, and there's always like common themes there, and it's just really really neat to hear as a human being. And the other cool thing we were talking about doing is some medical education specific episodes. What I wish I would have known as a pre-med and what I would have been doing if I'm interested in Bitcoin. What about as a medical student, as a resident, as an attending? Because obviously those finances are all different, your different stages of your career. We could kind of gear episodes to different individuals in those components. Even do stuff that's more directed towards nursing or techs. It doesn't have to be just docs.
Yeah, this is not a doc only podcast. We just named it that because we are docs, and like, it's for anyone that has an income that feels like they're too busy to like care about it, or doesn't know where, if they have a retirement account they work, if you don't know what you're invested in, like, stop the podcast, find your login, reset your password, just know where you're at. Like, take an audit of your own personal finances. Number one. Number two, that's number two. Number one is live within your means. Like, save more than you spend.
Save like a resident.
Yeah, just like live within your means. And your life stage has changed. That's the biggest struggle, I think, of part of the human experience is not keeping up with the Joneses and like being content. And that's a whole like a philosophical, spiritual tangent that we're not going to go down right this second. But yeah, I think that the same knowledge applies. We're just framing it in our experience of a fellowship in medical education. But everyone should be lifelong learners. You don't have to be a doctor to be a lifelong learner.
Yeah,
I'm a huge proponent of like the growth mindset, which maybe we'll talk about that one day. Like, it's an author that I'm drawing a blank on, but like, you either have a growth mindset or a fixed mindset. If you think that investing is for people smarter than you and you're never going to get ahead, like, you're not going to make it. If you think that if you acknowledge that there's unlimited information available to you, like on your cell phone, like, you have more power and information than like we took to the moon, literally to the moon. And that's a big like crypto Bitcoin euphemism, but we have more technology in our pocket every day than we flew people to the moon. So if you want to ignore that, that's fine. And you can watch TikTok, or if you want to tap into that and use all these AIs to hone you in on the information that will improve your life 100%.
Yeah, nobody cares about your money more than you do.
100
Right. I'm a big
exactly.
proponent of that. And so that's why we're here. There are no dumb questions. I know people harp on that a lot. That's the whole goal. It's like, I know when we're talking to other people, they don't even know what their retirement's in. They don't know how to get to their retirement. They don't know what company it is. They don't know how to move stuff over. They don't know what a 401k is. They don't understand a Roth versus a traditional account. That's the kind of the idea of this podcast, right? Is to make it this safe space so that we can all kind of come together and talk about it. And it's like, okay, well, now I know where my retirement money is and what I'm putting it in. Why do I have it in an S&P index versus, Mag 7 versus some Bitcoin proxy? And that's a conversation worth having. I'm not saying S&P isn't the right for some people, right? What about fixed income versus, talking about some of these strategy preferred stocks? Just as side anecdote, I talked to my 80-year-old granddad the other day, and I've been trying to shill him on Bitcoin for a long time, and he just hasn't been able to get in because he just sees the price volatility. But I talked to him about Strife, one of the strategy products that fixed 10% dividend and highest in the capital stack, lowest risk that strategy just came out with, and got him to buy some of that. So there's just so many conversations for these different generations, and that's the cool thing about Bitcoin is there's a product for everybody.
I was so excited when we opened this with the whole like hype video, and then we got into the weeds of it. And now that we're talking about where we're going, like the energy is like it's building. Like
it's the opposite of the Saylor side.
Yeah, it's the opposite. We're on Twitter, like kind of self plug. We're on Twitter at Orange Pill Docs. Let me put our names back up for our individual accounts. I'm at DocStacks and then at SpideyDoc3 for Adam. We do have an email set up at orangepilldocs@gmail.com. Feel free to reach out, message, mention us on Twitter, comment on YouTube, whatever you want. Share this with people who you think would find it interesting.
Yeah. Let us know what you guys want to see. There's, like we said, there's so many different directions this can go. We just want to, provide information. We just enjoy talking about it. This is what Chris and I do at home anyways. We're sitting there texting and talking while our fiance are watching.
Instead of getting on a video chat and talking, now we're just like hitting record and like putting up some slides so that if anybody wants to watch it later on, like you can kind of know what we were talking about. All right. What do we have any?
Yeah.
Is that it? Opportunity cost is king. Don't stay asleep. That's our number one message.
Wake up.
For this episode and the pod. I mean, wake up. There's a cost to staying asleep, and you don't want there. I'm contrasting this with like the dead man's portfolio. Like, once you're invested, you can go back to sleep, but you got to wake up and do some work. But thank you guys for watching. Like, follow, share, all the plugs. We're going to be bad self-marketers, but if we don't get engagement, it's hard to grow the channel.
Yeah. Not financial advice, right? This is solely our own views. Again, we just have to emphasize that this is for education and entertainment purposes only. You take your own rest with your own investments, but that's what we want you guys to own that, right? Own that aspect that no one cares about your money more than you do. So these are our own viewpoints. This is what we're actually doing, and they don't represent the ideas of our employer or any of our affiliated organizations.
Yep. All right, we got to close. I added a 30-second clip of some more Michael Saylor wisdom. That's not Bitcoin related, just about life. We'll watch that and we'll come back and close it out.
Focus your energy. Guard your time. Train your mind. Train your body. Think for yourself. Curate your friends. Curate your environment. Keep your promises. Stay cheerful and constructive. And upgrade the world.
Huge life advice. I don't know what else to say. I've been so pumped about this pod. We've been talking about it for a while. I think we're coming up on just about an hour. If you're watching this long, thank you for sticking with us. What you got, Adam?
Man, just watching those recommendations we had and then seeing Saylor, that's another one. If you guys are new to the Bitcoin space and you just don't know much, just go YouTube some of this Michael Saylor, watch his journey. We'll do a separate podcast at some point about strategy and how he's gone through the same experience as us with his company through COVID and him going through those struggles and now what it's transformed to and what he's doing. But there's just so much potential here in this space. We are still so early. And I think that's part of why Chris and I are always so bullish and so optimistic. And being young, you want to have that, right?
Yeah.
Our generation has been through so much as millennials already. Like, you want to have hope.
I'm tired of living through these like once in a generation events. We're at like double digits now.
Yeah. And unfortunately, I think another big print event, there's a war, all this kind of other stuff that's just happening all around us. You got to have something to be optimistic for, especially in medicine. So we'll see.
Yep.
We're excited for where this is going. We want to hear you guys engage and talk to us, and we're excited to bring out. Hopefully, one of the next podcasts will be us talking to some of the other docs and sharing some of those experiences.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you guys for sticking along. Peace.